Thank you, Ching Champla, and thank you, Umaylam, Youth for Umaylam, for giving me this opportunity. Actually, it's been, I think, a few years since I received first invitation to speak to your members in Minnesota, and eventually, it's now that we're able to interact with each other in an online way. So, anyway, thank you so much. As you mentioned, I hope to present to you in just the evolution of Umaylam, uh, how it developed, and what it means, and what it could foretell for the future to you. And it's important to you people who are dedicated towards promoting the issue of Umaylam to be really able to understand these different aspects of the issue to project your case properly. So, having said that, I want to begin with the origin of Umaylam. If you can see the screen, I've laid out two broad uh, sources for the Umaylam. First, of course, is His Holiness the Dalai Lama's own initiatives in the mid-1970s, when he began to look at the international situation, he began to look at the situation in China, and he began to see that it would make better sense for Tibet if there was some sort of resolution of issue through dialogue with China within the framework of the People's Republic of China. At that time, there wasn't any concept like Umaylam or anything autonomous, for example. But nevertheless, His Holiness discussed with his senior advisors that something ought to be done along the lines of talking with the Chinese within the PRC's framework. On the other hand, we had then Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping sending a message to His Holiness the Dalai Lama in late 1970s, whereby his core point of the message sent through His Holiness's younger brother, or elder brother, I'm sorry, Gyalo Thundubla, was that other than the issue of independence of Tibet, everything else can be discussed and resolved. Kongo Gyalo Thundubla has said that, in fact, he met Deng Xiaoping on March 12, 1979, where Deng Xiaoping gave this message. Now, this message is very crucial for us in understanding why Umaylam matters, because this is, it has two components. I'll come later on, but this message came at a time when His Holiness himself was discussing with his advisors about trying to find a solution within the framework of China. So it fit right into His Holiness's own thinking. And so His Holiness was able to respond positively to Deng Xiaoping's message. And so he established direct contact with the Chinese leadership thereafter, and thereafter began what is called the delegation diplomacy, where 4 fact-finding delegations from His Holiness the Dalai Lama's side, the Tibetan side, visited Tibet and China from 1979-80 till around 1984-85. And in Britain, there were 2 high-level exploratory delegations in 1982 and 84, 3-member exploratory delegation. Now, these are 2 different delegations. One is the fact-finding that really went to different parts of Tibet, saw the situation there to look and study the conditions of the Tibetan people, and then reported back to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The other was the exploratory delegation, which was sent to China to see if there was any basis for talks with China. So both these delegations are part of His Holiness's effort at trying to sort of find a resolution of the issue. In addition to these 2 delegations, we also had His Holiness's brother Gyalo Thundubla making frequent trips to China during this period to establish relationship with the Chinese authorities. That delegation diplomacy eventually was followed by subsequent initiatives from His Holiness's side. First is this 5-point peace plan in 1987 in Washington, D.C., which basically the 5th point of which was to start earnest negotiations on the issue of Tibet. The other 4 points are human rights, zone of peace, environment, etc. And then this was expanded in 1988 in Strasbourg at the European Parliament, when His Holiness came out with a framework of future Tibet that is in association with the People's Republic of China. That was a term that was used then. However, the Chinese authorities reacted negatively to this. You know, in the 1987 peace plan speech by His Holiness was followed soon after by China's clampdown in Tibet and denigration of His Holiness there, and which resulted in the Tibetan protests in 87, 88, and later on 89, etc. The Strasbourg proposal was followed by China's vehement condemnation, saying that anything that is independence, disguised independence, or half semi-independence will not be accepted by China. So that was the Chinese reaction to the Strasbourg proposal. So since there wasn't any response from the Chinese side in 1991, His Holiness made it clear that his table was clear and that he was keeping the Strasbourg plan aside. In case the Chinese responded, that will be a different matter. But on his side, he won't be taking it up like that. And the situation remained like that till 2002, where then contact was re-established, and the talks began between 2002 and 2010, 9 rounds of talks, and I've been privileged to be part of that period of talks when I accompanied Khosrow Lodi Giri, His Holiness's envoy, and his team to talks in China. These talks between 2002 and 2010 resulted in two written documents that the Tibetan side presented to the Chinese government. One was the Memorandum on Genuine Autonomy for the Tibetan people that was presented in 2008, and then the other was the note on the memorandum, which was presented in 2010. So these are the important documents about Umaylam that we need to be aware of in order to understand what it is. Now, what is Umaylam in the present context? In the present context, I think we have to base ourselves on the memorandum and the note. And the memorandum clearly says that the Umaylam, what the Tibetan people desire are 11 areas of autonomous rule. And what are these 11 areas autonomous rule? And these are in the memorandum itself. And these are language, culture, religion, education, environmental protection, utilization of natural resources, economic development and trade, public health, public security, regulation of population migration, cultural, educational, and religious exchanges with other countries. Now, if you look at the memorandum, you'll find that all these 11 points are already outlined in the Chinese constitution or law on regional ethnic autonomy. So these are nothing new that the Tibetan side is asking for, but which are already there and which are being demanded to be implemented for the Tibetan people as part of the Umaylam approach. So if you look at that, we can see that Umaylam is an initiative by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which is a pragmatic initiative that takes into consideration the Tibetan interest and the Chinese interest, and which calls for a solution for future Tibet that can be a viable, lasting, peaceful solution for all sides. That's why in Tibetan we call it Nime Umaylam, a mutually beneficial Umaylam. And there are some other features that I want to highlight over here. First, of course, is I think we have to look at Umaylam as a forward policy and not as the last resort. It's a forward policy because it's a win-win situation. It presents a win-win situation for all sides. And it's a forward policy, and the Chinese government does realize it, and that's why they are not able to have the political courage to respond positively to it. Because if they have to do that, they also have to change some of their attitude. Another aspect of Umaylam is that it contributes to the preservation of Tibetan identity and culture. We have seen His Holiness the Dalai Lama making this case time and again that his struggle for the Tibetan people is the struggle to preserve and promote Tibetan identity and culture. And that can be done within the framework of the Umaylam sphere. Third is that it also is an initiative that provides space for Tibetans inside and out of Tibet, because it's important for us to realize the political climate and environment of the Tibetan people inside Tibet who do not have any space or freedom to talk about political rights concepts that are even as harmless as human rights. So Umaylam can provide that because it talks of all a situation within the framework of China's own rules. Therefore, there have been some prominent Tibetans who have directly and indirectly supported the Umaylam from inside Tibet. Then it again provides a common future for all Tibetans because no matter what political goals you aspire for, nobody can deny the fact that if you can get the sort of demands that are outlined in the Umaylam, it will be beneficial for the Tibetan people. And it also provides a space for Tibet discussion in China because Chinese people, again, are very much sold into the Chinese government's position on the issue of Tibet. And so therefore, anything outside of that position will be difficult for us to engage with the Chinese people. And that's why His Holiness has also said that many Chinese scholars and writers have been supporting Umaylam. Then in the international sphere, Umaylam also provides an opportunity for governments to find a space to talk about Tibet because governments are very much sensitive to the Chinese strident effort not to have any public space for Tibet. And if anything can be done within the context of China's own rules, then the governments get that opportunity. And therefore, this is also something that Umaylam provides. I'm going through these in gist on it, but if later on when we have question and answer session, we can expand further. Now, if you look at China's own position in Umaylam, or what His Holiness has been asking through his memorandum and the note, then there are two broad things. They are not able to point out many of the detailed cases that have been laid out in the memorandum because all these form part of China's own laws, and it's an implementation of the Chinese laws. We have to again continue to repeat this point that it's about implementation of China's own guarantees enshrined in their rules, and that is the strength of Umaylam. So the two main areas where the Chinese are sort of criticizing Umaylam is that first it's asking quote unquote Greater Tibet. Now, by Greater Tibet, what Chinese mean? Of course, we know that when we talk of Tibet, we're talking about the three provinces of Tibet, the Cherkasum. But from Chinese context, when they talk about Tibet, they're just referring to the Tibet Autonomous Region. So what Umaylam is asking for is for all Tibetans, no matter where they are living, whether inside the Tibet Autonomous Region or in other Tibetan areas in Qinghai, Yunnan, Gansu, or Sichuan provinces, that they all be given the same rights and respect and dignity that are to be given for Tibetans. Second is that under this Umaylam scenario, Tibetans are asking for all Chinese to be removed from Tibet. That is not the case. I think if you look at the memorandum, there's a point there which talks about regulation of population migration. That is possible even within China's own laws. Currently, if you look at the situation in Hong Kong, when Hong Kong's basic law and China's own taking over Hong Kong was decided, there was a clause in the Hong Kong basic law which said that Chinese mainlanders cannot settle in Hong Kong without prior permission from the Hong Kong authorities. And so similarly, what the Tibetan side is asking for Tibet is something like that, which will guarantee the Tibetan people that environment and the opportunity to preserve and promote our identity. Because if Tibet is flooded by Chinese, then there won't be that opportunity. So that is what we have to say. Now, what the Chinese are looking or waiting for is these things. First, that I believe that they're waiting for His Holiness to pass away so that they believe that once he passes away, the Tibetan issue will die away. Secondly, one of the challenges we have is what sort of political climate, political leadership we will have in the post-retirement period of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which began in 2011. Already 10 years are about to pass since His Holiness' retirement. We have seen how the Tibetan domestic politics have been playing out. And as I talked this mentioned this to you today. We are in the process of entering another political cycle in the Tibetan election, whereby we have to see how the Tibetan people fare in our own efforts to be people responsible for shouldering our own responsibilities for the future of Tibet in the post-retirement scenario. So these are some challenges that we have to see. Now, the way forward, as I see it, is right now, I mentioned about the two components in Deng Xiaoping's initial message to His Holiness. And what are the two components? Is the two components, first, that the issue of Tibetan independence cannot be talked about. That's one. The second component is that if everything else can be discussed and resolved. Now, if you look at what His Holiness and the Tibetan leadership's initiatives have been so far, it's my belief, and it's the belief of many people, that the Tibetan side has fulfilled both the components of Deng Xiaoping's message. It's only that the Chinese authorities haven't had the political courage to respond to this Tibetan response and to move the process forward to the resolution of the Tibetan issue. So why can then people who support Umaylam, what can people who support Umaylam do? It is to take Umaylam proactively, and not as merely as a way, as a political tool for us to use against our own fellow Tibetans who have other points of view, but to show that through Umaylam, it doesn't matter what other people political concept may be, we can provide a better solution for the future of Tibet. Thank you very much. And then I'll stop there and get your questions.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Bujamai. Appreciate the great level of detail, and also the high level content that you provided. Thank you so much. This is great. A lot of good information here. I'll open this time for Q&A. If any of the attendees have questions, Bujamai will address it, and we'll go from there. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself, and then fire away with any questions. Okay. Okay. All right. So if not, that's okay. I do have some questions coming in from some of our youth that are very curious about this particular talk and Umaylam in general. So I'll just fire away on their behalf, since some of our youth are not able to join today, but are still very curious to find out about Umaylam. So the first question I've got here so far is, how can youth these days be more involved in promoting Umaylam?
Yeah, there are two aspects of this issue. Well, first of all, I think in order to really promote Umaylam, you have to understand what is Umaylam. Currently, one of the challenges in the Tibet movement is that all of us know things, whether we are supporting Umaylam or whether we're supporting independence, very superficially. And I should be frank in saying that. And with that superficial notion, then we mix that with parochialism, we mix that with regionalism, we mix that with some other personality issue, etc., and then create a situation where we are not able to present the issue in the way that we should be doing it. So therefore, it's very much pertinent for us, all of us, to be really understanding what is Umaylam. And for that, as I mentioned in my presentation, in the present context, it's very essential that all of us understand the details of the memorandum and details of the note. There are so many concepts there, the 4 adherents, the 4 respects, etc., or the 3 adherents, I think. Also, all these are things that we really need to understand if we want to go forward in that, and then to understand the political climate in which His Holiness has made this presentation, why this issue doesn't contradict anyone who's supporting independence. That has to be very clear, because if we can present Umaylam in the best possible way, in the correct way, then it will help His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan leadership in moving forward with resolution of the Tibetan problem. If, on the other hand, they were not able to understand Umaylam properly and then misrepresent or present it in a way that it's not the right way, then it might even be counterproductive. And I say that even with those who are supporting independence. I say that if you really support Tibetan independence, if you can do it in the right way, then your support for Tibetan independence will in fact help the Tibetan leadership in resolving the issue through Umaylam. But on the other hand, if you just use independence as a slogan and as a tool, then use it wrongly, then it will not help but be counterproductive. And but so these are things that we have to people who support Umaylam have to sort of think over when we move forward in this political movement.
Perfect. All right, thank you. Second question I have here is historically the CTA task force has made great progress, but how can diplomats continue on mutual beneficial dialogue in the future on both sides of the table?
If I maybe I should say I'll understand this question the way how can Tibetan leadership
Yes.
move the diplomacy forward, and that's a very important point for us to ask. And we right now we're entering into an election cycle, and we have to understand that the fundamental cause of the Tibetan struggle is not to achieve a perfect democracy, but to achieve a political solution to the issue of Tibet. And if you can set that clear in your mind, then you'll be able to not lose track of the bigger issue and not be sort of bogged down by smaller details that only promote mutual animosity. And there it's important for the Tibetan leadership to come out with a strategy that can move the process forward on diplomacy. The Chinese government will not be there coming to you offering diplomacy in a platter. You have to ask for dialogue. The dialogue between 2002 and 2010, since I know a little bit about inside and outside developments of it, I can say that it came about not because the Chinese said that they were willing to talk. It came out because the Tibetan side pushed for dialogue, not just with Beijing, but with the international community, with governments throughout the world. And so if the Tibetan leadership can take this process forward through a strategy, through a policy that can really engage international community and move the process forward, then there is this possibility. Because after all, the Chinese government does realize that the issue of Tibet is a problem. Just a week or so back, they had one of the most important meetings on Tibet, a 2-day meeting where the full Politburo Standing Committee members attended in the midst of the pandemic situation, in the midst of economic slowdown. The Chinese leaders spent 2 days talking about Tibet. So they know it's a problem. So it's for our side to see how we can exploit that opportunity.
Wow, that's a really great insight to know, because we don't see all of this on the media channel and whatnot, but knowing that there's a dialogue happening behind the scene during the pandemic is a huge plus, and it's a remarkable move from both ends. So I believe.
I should correct. I didn't say dialogue was happening behind the scene. Oh, sorry, but in the midst of this pandemic, the Chinese authorities are devoting 2 full days to discussing Tibet, and that shows that they hold Tibet important. Otherwise, even here in the United States, we can see that the Trump administration is keeping aside many other issues because everybody is focused on the COVID prevention. So that's why sometimes why we need to say that is because the Chinese give the impression that there is no Tibet issue. The Chinese give the impression that everything is fine in Tibet. The May holding of this Tibet conference shows that not everything is fine in Tibet.
Okay, that's a great point. Thank you so much. Okay. Tildrum, our Vice President of Y4U Umaylam, has 2 questions he would like to ask. Tildrum, whenever you're ready.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question, and that's a question that now everybody is asking, not just on Tibet, but even the United States. As we speak, United States had a trade understanding with China, and now uh, even President Trump, as much as he is very much strong against China, he is not able to get the Chinese to implement some of the same understanding that the Chinese have had with the United States. So that will always be an issue, not just because of Hong Kong, but in any sort of dealings with China. Secondly, hindsight is 2020, you know, so. But I can only say that we have to learn from the Hong Kong experience to see that how we can ensure that, first of all, the Chinese sit down on the negotiation table based on the Umaylam approach and find a resolution issue. And secondly, how this final solution can be guaranteed. And that is something for, again, it goes back to what I've been saying about the strategy, because I think at our level, at people who are supportive, at Youth for Umaylam level, people who are supportive of the issue of Tibet, you are not part of the strategy making community. You are there because you understand the benefit of Umaylam and you are trying to help it achieve its goals. It's for the Tibetan leadership to come out with a strategy to see that based on whatever is happening internationally, it can mold its policy and find resolution of the issue. And finally, if we look at the Hong Kong development as negative to Tibet, and then what is the alternative? What can be done that can really help the Tibetan people in their day-to-day existence currently? Because Umaylam, it also is helping the Tibetan people in Tibet currently in the preservation of Tibetan identity, preservation of Tibetan culture, promotion of Tibetan language, etc. The Chinese are making much effort these days, also because the Tibetan leadership outside has been stressing on these points in their discussions with the Chinese government. So we have to look at all these things when we talk about any connections between what may be happening in Hong Kong and what should be happening for Tibet. The fundamental leverage we have is the determination of the Tibetan people. The determination of the Tibetan people to preserve and promote and protect our identity and way of life. As long as that is there, whether you call it Umaylam as a political concept or whether you don't call it anything, if that is the yearning that is in the people's mind, and that is there inside Tibet. They may not be calling it Umaylam, but that's fundamentally what is driving the Tibetan people inside Tibet. The quest for your language, the quest for your religion, the quest for your culture. And so these are important leverage for us. The notion that the Chinese is a power base is wrong now, and it's been proved wrong now. Of course, it is. It's the economic power. It thought that it could have economic leverage over the rest of the world, but now we are seeing that countries are coming up against China's might, and it's presenting a different scenario. The Chinese were trying to introduce a new world order that was dependent on China. Now today's world, whether it's the United States, whether it's Australia, whether it's the United Kingdom, more and more countries are coming up. Or for that matter, India. All countries are now standing up against China. And China is realizing that the days of it taking the international community for granted is over. So within that sort of political climate, if the determination of the Tibetan people is strong, and if we can seize that opportunity, then that's the leverage. And therefore, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been able to promote, protect that determination of the Tibetan people through all his long far-seeing effort, far-seeing strategy. Many of you would not, I think you all may not have been born then in the 70s when His Holiness first began to talk about a concept called the happiness of the Tibetan people. At that time, His Holiness said that I'm only striving for Tibetan happiness. And many people begin to wonder, why is His Holiness saying happiness is not independence? Then His Holiness explained that it's very easy for us to mouth slogans, but if we want to interact with the international community, we have to come up with issues that can really challenge the international community. And who can deny happiness to anyone? And His Holiness at one time even said that maybe, in one sense, independence may be an easier thing to achieve than happiness, because you may not have happiness even if you have independence. So all these things are leverage that we have.
Okay, that's great. Great, thank you so much for addressing all of the inquiries here. I'd like to open this time now for our attendees to provide an opportunity to ask any questions.
And if possible, if you can switch on your video so that I can see that I am not addressing T or S or K.
If they wish to do so. Okay, I'll give you 3 seconds to ask a question. If not, I've got one coming up from one of our youth. So I'll give you 3 seconds.
I have a quick question. So I don't know the exact document and the exact meeting, but I believe that in the course of the negotiations that were held in the past, one of the basis of sort of their rejection or their counter argument was saying that, like, essentially the Umaylam was inherently seeking independence, and they've kind of used that as a basis of, I guess, I don't know, like their counter argument. And how do you, I guess I think like the Tibetan community has always and will always sort of be in that split where it's either Umaylam or independence. So from like a very strategic standpoint, it seems like kind of a stalemate. And I guess, how do you overcome that? Or I guess not overcome, but how would you respond to somebody who might say that?
Yeah, I think you raised 2 points. First is the Chinese objection to the Umaylam approach as being independent, one of independence. And that is something that they mentioned after the Strasbourg proposal in 1988. And even when the memorandum was presented to them. Basically, as somebody who has participated in the internal discussions, I can say for certain that the Chinese authorities really know that what His Holiness and the Tibetan leadership is asking for is not independence. They do know that. They don't have the political courage to come up with an alternative that can really address the Tibetan issue. Therefore, in order to sort of avoid having to address the issue, they're using these political excuses like independence or semi-independence or disguised independence. These are the terms that the Chinese have been using against His Holiness's initiatives to not to address the issue at all. But as I said earlier, if you read the memorandum and if you read the sources from where the 11 basic needs of the Tibetan peoples are outlined, we'll see that there are clauses and articles in the Chinese constitution or the law of regional or ethnic autonomy which contain these points. So these are nothing to do with something outside the framework of the Chinese constitution. That has to be understood. So Chinese will keep on saying that no matter what His Holiness is, no matter what the international community says, the Chinese will keep on saying His Holiness is a split, the term that they use for separatists, or that no matter what the governments say, even if it's a harmless thing like saying Tibetan people should have religious freedom, they'll say you're interfering in our internal affairs. So we should not be cowed down by these Chinese positions. But on the other hand, The other aspect of your issue is about this the difference in that within the Tibetan community between Umaylam and independent, etc. So I don't see these as fundamentally different. That I'm not saying this for the sake of saying it, but that is the mindset that even those who are the youth for Umaylam are supporting the Umaylam should be adopting, because ideally, whether you are for independence or whether you are for Umaylam, you are fighting for the rights of the Tibetan people. We have to find a way to see the common ground in our different elements. Because if you just want to look for differences, then you'll find differences everywhere, right from within your family, the way you dress, the way you think, the way, or within even we call ourselves as Buddhists. That's a very common ground for most Tibetans, right? But if you want to look for differences, you'll find that, oh, he's a Kagyu, I'm a Gilok, she is a Nyingma. If you want to find all this, you will continue to find these things. Rather than going into this negative aspect, if you can try to sort of focus on the positive aspect of finding common ground, then that will be a better way of sort of addressing the issue. What happens is that, again, in these internet or age, in the social media driven age, in this period when now, particularly during the lockdown, people have so much time in their hand and then they can see many things. Unless you are really able to change the course of the debate, you'll get bogged down in the same sort of rhetoric and cycle over it, and you cannot get outside of it. So I think changing the mindset is very important.
That's great. Perfect. Okay. Any other questions from our attendees? Okay. All right. If not, very last question here. So fast forward into future. Say, suppose our Tibetan leadership has a strategy in place, and that strategy we execute, we support, and suppose that strategy goes into execution mode with a positive outcome. And super fast forward to that to say, if Tibetans are back in Tibet, what type of rights do Tibetans have versus what type of rights would Chinese hold?
Yeah, again, I will point you back to the memorandum and the note. The 11 basic needs of the Tibetan people are the rights that the Tibetan people will have or should have, or which the Tibetan leadership is demanding that they have. And these rights are, again, some of these are very much there for the Chinese themselves also to sort of enjoy. But these are primarily there so that these can help in the preservation and promotion of Tibetan identity. That's the important aspect of Umaylam, to my understanding, is based on the people rather than on the land. It's talking about the people. Therefore, when the Chinese say Umaylam is asking for greater Tibet, that is what, because the Chinese are focusing on the land. And the land, when they say Tibet, it's just the territory of what is called the Tibet Autonomous Region. But if you focus on the people, even China's own demographic map, if you look at that, and if you look at that to see where are all the Tibetan people, that is what we traditionally call Tibet. And the Chinese cannot deny the fact that these areas are occupied by Tibetans. So Umaylam is talking about the rights of these people to enjoy the benefits that is out there. We are, again, when we talk about right enjoyment, again, I said that one of the criticism of the Chinese side was that it is calling for the expulsion of all Chinese. That is definitely not true. His Holiness had said long time back, even before we had the memorandum, that when he said the migration of Chinese to Tibet should stop, he meant that the Chinese should not overwhelm the Tibetan people, because otherwise, if the Chinese are allowed a free entry into the Tibetan area, eventually Tibet is full of Chinese. Then it doesn't matter whether Tibet, quote unquote, Tibet, the land, has autonomy or it doesn't matter whether Tibet has even plebiscite, because then it'll be full of Chinese who will dominate the result. So it's for these reasons that the memorandum has looked at some areas of human existence which are critical for the preservation and promotion of identity. And these are things that the Tibetan people should be enjoying.
All right, great. Thank you so much. A lot of great information, a lot of useful and meaningful, valuable contents you've provided, Pujungla. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're a busy man and you've got a lot on your plate, but you know, Sunday morning spending time with us means a lot. And on behalf of all of our youth for Umaylam in Minnesota and all over the world, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Champal, and thank you very much for you, for Umaylam, for giving me this opportunity. And I think if you can take, if there's one takeaway from today's interaction, it is that I think we all need to change our mindset in the way we look at the issue of Tibet, beginning with our own position to see what we really understand from that position, and then go forward in the positive direction. If we do that, we will all be contributing towards the resolution of the Tibetan issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Thank you.